Hey guys, Katie here. We're going to have a look at a gait analysis with our horse Rabbit here. So Rabbit is a paint cross collide, I think. So the things that we're looking for are, we start with the hind legs. How well are they tracking up and through? So we can see that he's not tracking up yet. Which will be an indication of his relaxation and swing over his back, and will also affect how well he can relax into and seek contact and extend through the shoulder. There is a little bit of extension through the shoulder, although there he's pulling with the chest and shoulders, so is on the forehand. You can tell with the way that the underneck engages against the contact, and there we have a little bit of lift and extend through the shoulder when he engages. So you can typically tell when the horses give you a step of engagement if you watch for the way that this hind leg comes through a little bit further and the tail swishes. So as we asked for a bit of bend there, hind leg steps, tail swishes, and the shoulder lifts and extend. So we're getting little steps here and there of engagement, but you can see now that he's driving off of the outside hind. He did lose that little bit of step through that he got, and so that does mean that he will be working with a bit of twist and rotation through the pelvis, and he's back on the forehand here. We can tell by the way that his hind legs are driving out from behind, which means that he'll be pulling with his chest and shoulders. We ask the inside hind to engage there. There's not a whole lot of step through. A lot of the weight bearing is on the forehand. So any of the frame that we're getting at the moment is going to be a false frame where he's just going to be flexing at the neck and the top line isn't going to be engaged. So you can see there where the underneck is engaged. So even though we're getting periods of his head being on the vertical, he isn't working his top line, so technically he's still hollow. We don't have our horses working without hollowness until this underneck muscle softens up and the top line muscle starts working, because it is the fact that this underneck muscle is engaged means that his balance is on the forehand and he's pulling with his chest and shoulders. So any neck or pole flexion that we create while he's doing there is going to be a false flexion and just breaking him away into that frame instead of actually engaging the top line, which is detrimental to the horse. And we're getting a step through from the inside hind there, and you can see when we get that step of engagement, the outside hind disengages. So we are getting also a false bend in that he is rotating the pelvis to bend instead of keeping even engagement of both hind legs. And so we see that there that the right hip has dropped, and so that means that he isn't going to be in self-carriage. So he is not too far off tracking up in the trot there. So he's probably, getting pretty close to being able to work in self-carriage, but he just lacks a bit of balance to relax and swing into the contact. And he's not ready yet to engage both hind legs properly. So if he engages one, he drops the other. So it means that we've got basically a bunch of conditioning work to do with him. So on this right rein, he struggles to engage the right hind. So you can see how it's only just stepping up, and then he's favouring driving out off of it rather than stepping it through. And he also favours leaning into the right shoulder for his balance. So typically keeping that outside hind disengaged rotates the pelvis. Again, you can see it here where he's driving off of that hind leg and stepping through into engagement, which means that the balance is on the right shoulder. So this makes him extremely crooked and brings us to our biggest training block at the moment, in that he can't pick up the right canter lead. On the left rein though, you can see here he's stepping the left hind through a little better. So we just really need to even and straighten his balance out. And you can see also that that left shoulder is picking up better as well. So this makes him very crooked because he drives off of the right hind, engages off of the left, weight bears in the right shoulder and lifts through the left. So this, you know, does create problems. You can see it where he loses the forwardness to contact there. This does create problems and can long-term create soundness issues by working this crooked, because we've got so much concussion in the right shoulder and so much, you can really start to see it there, the twist through the pelvis. It's what creates the pain in the lower back there. So our first step is just to be asking him to work more straight, more through into the contact, and asking this working on this left, so right hind, to get it to come through more. So when we go to have a look at what our canter looks like and we talk about, you know, problems that he's having in his trot here, the right hind is disengaged, all of his weight bearing is in the right shoulder, which means that picking the shoulder up and engaging into this right canter lead is near on impossible for him. And you can see him try, and then he will favour the left canter lead. But with this left hind, we've already said it steps through okay and the shoulder lifts okay. So he picks up this left canter lead okay. But because we have so much unevenness in that canter development of the right lead and the left lead, it does mean that we don't have forwardness in the canter. So we don't have a great canter either way because of how crooked his development is. So the canter has natural roundedness and a cadence to it that connects the action of the hindquarters to the action of the shoulders. And we need even engagement from both hind legs and quite straight through the back for that to work for us. And you can see asking him for the right canter lead here. And it's just a lot easier for him to pick that left shoulder up, and you can see where the right shoulder gets trapped there and again there. So the lift of the shoulder is related to him not stepping through and weight bearing through the right hind. Also means that he's not bending laterally correctly around the inside leg because he prefers to lean into that shoulder and disengage the hind leg. So here's Rabbit after a couple of months on working through our exercises in green to self carriage. Now the main thing that that is going to hinder us is that he needs to have a nice strong canter established both leads to be working properly over his back into contact. So you can see here where, you know, he's still working a little hollow, he's still got that under neck muscle engaged. Where our real focus is what those hind legs are doing. So you can start to see here where they're tracking up a little bit further and the right hind is stepping through into more of a weight bearing position. He does still disengage it, so it does take time to build the strength and condition up and straight, especially when they're really crooked. Like, it really takes time to straighten them out. So you can see here where the track up is getting closer and the weight bearing is getting better. And we're getting a little bit more even lift and through of the shoulder. So he's getting that right hind through for periods of time, so little steps here and there. And as he gets the hind leg through, he can lift the shoulder. So he's got it there. And you can see because he made the pole sweetly. But we're still getting a slight rotation of the pelvis instead of true bend. So when he gets around the leg, the outside hind drops. So we get the inside hind to step through and the outside hind disengages and starts driving. And so that's really like a big limiting factor between you know, taking your horse from being green through to self-carriage, is that the initial suppleness that they develop is only for engagement of one hind leg at a time, and it's part of our work to get both hind legs stepping through evenly into a position of weight bearing to create a straight horse that isn't working with crookedness. So if we pick him up and then put our inside leg on, you can see where he steps through into that place of engagement, which allows him to lift a little bit more through the shoulder. And we're just using a little bit of leg yield to keep the movement open. So you can see when he comes uphill, it tightens his back and grounds the forehand. So we're combining our uphill exercises that kind of like pull him more up into self-carriage with our downhill exercises. So the leg yield is very suppling for Rabbit and puts him downhill onto the forehand to create the elasticity and the tone of the back to actually be able to come up into periods of self-carriage. So about here is probably his best self-carriage at the moment, and what we're looking for is even angles of engagement, so even angles through the hindquarters to the elevation of the shoulder to the depth of frame. So if we were to pull him down into a frame there, because that underneck muscle is still engaged, because a lot of his balance is still in his forehand, you're just going to be creating problems with false flexion and putting too much stress on his top line muscles. So allowing him to just take the contact out into a stretch and open his back out, and then asking him to bring himself back up together and uphill again. It's like doing little push-ups for horses, as we say, okay, push up into the contact and then relax out of it, push up into the contact and then relax out of it. The problem that we have is if we expect them to go from not being able to work into a frame to being able to work consistently in a frame, you know, initially we're only getting like a step here and there. So we've got one step of inside hind to outside rein connection there. We can't expect him to hold it because he will fatigue. And that's the outside hind dropping there and disengaging. So it's still easier for him to twist his pelvis than to bend laterally around the leg. So we're not going to see an improvement in that trot work until we get the canter established evenly in both ways. So that's really the main focus, and the thing about getting the canter established is that you've just got to do it. You just got to get them pick up that right canter lead, and then you go get them pick up the right canter lead, get them pick up the right canter lead, pick up until you know, it's just super easy for them. So after a couple of months of doing our green to self-carriage, Rabbit is now very easily picking up the right canter lead, and so the next step is building forwardness in the canter in both directions. So just because he can pick up the strike off on that canter lead now doesn't mean that he's forward active and balanced in the canter. It just means that he can get the strike off. And so we've got to do the strike off, do the strike off, do the strike off, get him thinking about traveling with forwardness in the canter so that we can get the get his back freed up and working, so that the action of the hindquarters is connecting to the action of the forehand for his back to be working. And we have to do that by going canter left, canter right, canter left, canter right. So we've got a strike off the inside leg there. And you can see the difference with that hind leg coming through and the shoulder extending and lifting, and he's able to get himself over a little canter pole. So that's what we're looking for when we're building even and straight. We're looking for, are these hindquarters tracking up? Are they tracking up evenly? Are they stepping through or pushing more off of one or the other? And then once these hindquarters are working well, are they relaxing over their back to contact, seeking connection, working to the hand? And then once they're doing that, we can start picking them uphill into self-carriage and freeing up the action of the shoulders so that we create throughness, impulsion, and then we can work towards collection. So the inside hind is through there and the inside shoulder is extending, but we know that he can do this left canter lead well. We don't need to do too much of it. Having a pole down for him and encouraging him to actually jump over the pole, because the canter is very flat, also helps to build up the quality of the cadence of the canter, because that's, where all of his weakness, you can see that rotation of the pelvis is still there. So this is where we keep working with our body worker in combination with like our kind of physiotherapy exercises, where we keep asking him to use himself. So there's him trying to step through, there's the engagement there, and there's the shoulder extending. So we have to keep working with our body workers so that that when they are building and conditioning, they're not building and conditioning crooked. Oh, here we go. So that they're not building and conditioning crooked. So what we're doing with our exercises is we're creating an environmental stress, and the body has to adapt to it. So the body can adapt to it positively in a way that it enhances our horse's soundness, freedom of movement, willingness for forward, or it can adapt negatively where it creates pain, tightness, destabilizes joints, range of movement, and then long-term creates unsoundness, concussion, and then long-term creates arthritis, and like our horses break down too early because of it. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create just the right amount of stress on the horse's body, that their body is adapting positively to it to enhance their overall soundness and longevity of their career. And we do that in combination with our body workers, because there's only so much that exercise can do before we need someone in our other professional industries just to make sure that everything is developing along the right ways, because our horses do like to compensate, and they can injure themselves in the paddock and create their own twists and whatnot through their body just by having a slip in the paddock, or getting caught up in fence line, those kinds of things. So the exercise gets us part of the way where we're just asking them to use themselves with evenness, straightness, balance, so that they're weight bearing through their hindquarters, which takes the concussion off the forehand, and then stacking the vertebrae of their spine for straightness so that they can then work through their back with relaxation and swing. Basically what we're doing is like a green horse will be balanced in the forehand and tensing their underneck muscle as a result, and the hindquarters will be driving out backwards. What that does is it creates that hollowness through the back, and then we sit on top of that hollowness, which makes it even more hollow and puts strain on the hindquarters. So the process of taking our horse from green to self-carriage is to encourage them to take their weight bearing into their hindquarters, and then to engage their stomach muscles to hold themselves up instead of leaning onto their chest. And then, so we've got the weight bearing through the hind, we've got them engaging their core, and then we want them to seek the contact so that they're reaching and opening through their back and their spine, which allows for the extension of the shoulder. And so then that's going to start engaging basically the muscles around the spine to allow them to pick the forehand up and extend through the shoulder instead of pull through it, which is what softens the underneck, and then that's what allows our horse to work into a frame. And so from there we kind of bring the two ends together to pop the shoulders up and that allows for the impulsion and the freedom of movement of the forehand. So it's a big process, and it's important that we do it well for our horses if we want them to carry us, because we're putting our weight into a very vulnerable part of their back. Any stress on the lower back there creates issues with bucking, issues with mounting, lacking forwardness, so they're really dead off the leg. They lose that forward enthusiasm. Any tightness through the base of the neck and the shoulders results in rearing. We can have the same issues with mounting, except they're rearing. And then bolting can also happen, especially if their back is quite weak and you hit it heavy. They kind of scoot off to kind of get away from you kind of hitting their back a little bit. And so they're obviously just the dramatic responses to pain from us sitting on their back. We can kind of have other problems that, when we have good horses that are unreactive to pain, just end up lame and being sore and having issues with traveling and with movement, and it makes them more prone to tears from work, and then that has that ongoing effect that if they injure a muscle, then they're going to compensate for it by twisting more. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get that nice weight bearing through the hindquarters, tracking up evenly into the prints of the forefeet, however you want to call it. And then we want to encourage them to start engaging their stomach muscles so that they're carrying up into us instead of away from us. And then that allows for them to kind of push up into us and hold us a little bit better. So if you think about somebody was sitting on your back and, they had their legs coming around where your ribs are, like all of your strength for that is in your shoulders and your chest. So your back kind of it arcs away from them. But that's no good for your back. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage, your horse to just kind of lift up into you just a little bit to kind of counteract the weight that you're putting onto them. And then just kind of stack their spine so that it's nice straight for balance, and then relaxed and swinging. We'd love to know if you have any issues with the canter, any issues with canter leads, if this has just gone completely over your head and you're confused now. But this is basically what we're kind of doing with our gait analysis is looking at how well the horses are using their body for soundness, and then giving you lesson plans to implement the exercises that will help your horse with just, no horse is going to be perfectly straight and sound. So it's just using and complementing our exercises to give our horses the best chance at carrying us without pain. Thanks for watching. Bye.